Good afternoon. Today we are going to have a little talk about school refusal. Now, school refusal is often confused with school truancy. Let me clarify for you. School truancy is more of a deliberate act where students are, you believe your child is at school, but your child is actually truanting off school and out in the community. It's an act which they're very aware of, whereas school refusal is more commonly seen as a disorder. And it is a form of anxiety disorder in which, for some reason, the child feels unable to participate in the normal mainstream classroom. Now, this can cause problems on different layers. The biggest problem of all, I would say, is for the child, because anxiety is not something that is deliberately under our control. It is something that can take over a person and will need help to be dealt with. And this is where the discussion should begin. Often, children who refuse school refuse it because something's happening either at home, in which they don't want to be away from it so that they feel more in control of the issues that are happening, or something's happening at school which is causing them undue anxiety. That could be bullying, it could be not understanding. It has little, I would say there's little causal relationship between ability and school refusal, because often research has shown that students who refuse school are often of a high ability. It's more than that, and this is why they need help. They need understanding, and the understanding will help them to resolve the issues in the shortest time possible. Now, there's a short-term effect which could be resolved by having home tuition. And that home tuition should be geared not necessarily at the whole curriculum, but should be geared at keeping the learning gaps as small as possible, to ensure that that student is able to reintegrate at the point that they feel able to. And that's another important point. Notice that I say at the point that they feel able to. Anxiety disorders are not ones that you can actually set a time limit on. It really depends on the person. It really depends on open lines of communication. It really depends on open conversations between the school and the parents. It really depends on finding a solution that can provide continuity for the child. In the long term, the provision of home tuition is not necessarily a bad thing, in that it keeps continuity happening in the learning process, but it's not necessarily a good thing either, because it could, if it's an anxiety about being away from home, it is given the option of only being at home, which leads to more problems in adult life, maybe with agoraphobia or matters such as that, deeper mental health issues. So what I would suggest is that at any time, this needs to be reviewed constantly to ensure that the child is getting the help that they need to resolve their anxiety. And we should try to avoid as much as possible putting a time limit on how long it takes, because who knows how long it takes. A certain level of respect has to be given here to the matters that are happening within the head of this child. Of course, schools will offer policies, and if it's a bullying issue, there should be a bullying policy which is available on the school website. On top of this, there's the education welfare officer who will try and get the child back to school as early as possible. All of these things are put in place to help, but at the end of the day, we all have to be quite realistic about this and realise, as I've said several times, all students are individual. Some can accept help at that point and some won't. If I'm honest, the problems that I had when I was at school would not have been resolved by an education welfare officer, because the bullying was quite on a deep level. The problem was resolved by a teacher because I could just talk to that one teacher. And that little pastoral connection worked well for me. But we have to keep in mind the learning of the student. Now, I'd like to add here, and to make this absolutely clear, last night I was sent a video of a fellow who was saying the school system is outdated and it's all down to the parents. The parents wanting to impress their friends, and so therefore they want to put their children through the system in order to have results that, they're like their child is going to university. I do not agree. I will never agree with that. I do agree that the school system is somewhat outdated. And as I've said before, I don't understand how students in these days are taking the exact same exams that I took many moons ago. So from that point of view, yes, the school system is outdated. And it is geared towards one result, and that is to produce more people to go to work. So the government would be happy with that, wouldn't they? However, I do think, as with my own curriculum that I've developed, that this should be developed more within the mainstream classroom. The recognition that students are different. We're living in different times. We're living in different measurements. We're living in different, it's a different world. Let's just put it like that, save me saying different. It's a different world with different requirements, and we have to recognize as parents that our kids might want different things to what we needed at the time. And many parents do. I'm not going to parent blame at any point. Many parents do recognize this and have stopped trying to keep up with the Joneses, as far as qualifications go, and have started listening more to the needs of their kids. As long as we continue along those lines, we should be able to produce an education of a form for our kids. Education has now become quite a big word because it can contain so many different ways of doing it. So, so my call to action today is, if your child is suffering from school phobia or school refusal, then it's time to not just sit and wait for it to move on, because it won't. And you put yourself in danger of fines, penalties, and other action by the school. It's time to have a conversation with the school and put steps into place to try and resolve the matter with as few learning gaps as possible being created for your child. The longer it's left, the more that their education will be affected, and they will take this into adulthood, which nobody wants. Nobody wants to put their child in a position that they can't cope with adulthood. So on that note, I'm going to leave you with that, and I'm going to say again, if you would like any help whatsoever in contacting the schools to put things into place, to talk through any issues that your child may have, to look for solutions, feel free to contact me at www.jgeducate.com, and I'll be happy to talk things through with you. But in the meantime, have a lovely day.